In November of 2012, what should have been just a mandatory visit of a son to his father during the Thanksgiving holiday turned into one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent Colorado history. Dylan Redwine, a boy of just 13 years old, mysteriously disappeared from his father's house, Mark Redwine, and the reason was frightening. He discovered a secret about his father that cost him his life. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, this is the perfect time to subscribe and follow this unbelievable story and understand what secrets were these that made a father take the life of his own son. To understand how this terrible case began, we need to go back to the fateful day when Dylan was forced to visit the father with whom he had a complicated relationship. This visit, determined by court order after his parents' divorce, would be the perfect setting for the discovery of a dark secret that would end up costing the teenager's life. On the 18th of November 2012, Dylan flew to Colorado to spend the Thanksgiving holiday with his father in Bayfield. He was visibly reluctant to make this visit, as evidenced by his text messages to his mother, Elaine, in which he included a sad face emoji when confirming he was with his father. The tension was palpable from the beginning. After picking him up at the airport, Mark took Dylan to Walmart to buy groceries, followed by a stop at McDonald's for dinner, a superficial attempt at normalcy between father and son. That same night, Dylan already demonstrated his discomfort by asking to spend the night at a friend's house, something Mark promptly denied. Instead, they made plans for Dylan to meet his friends the following morning at 6:30, a meeting that would never happen. Mark's official version of the following day would be repeated countless times during the investigation. On the morning of November 19th, he woke up at 7 and saw Dylan sleeping on the couch. He tried to wake him up for the appointment with his friends, but Dylan said he was too tired. Mark then left to go shopping, returning around 11:30 to find the house empty, with only a cereal bowl on the couch and the TV tuned to the Nickelodeon channel. According to him, Dylan's backpack, cell phone, and fishing rod had disappeared, suggesting that the boy had left on his own. What Mark didn't imagine is that this seemingly simple story would be meticulously dissected by investigators in the following months, revealing inconsistencies that would indicate a much more sinister crime than a simple disappearance. The secret that Dylan discovered about his father was about to come to light, along with the terrible truth about his disappearance. As hours turned into days, the story told by Mark Redwine began to crumble under the weight of its own contradictions. What initially seemed to be the account of a concerned father about his son's disappearance revealed itself to be a web of poorly constructed lies that raised the first suspicions of investigators. One of the first warning signs emerged when Mark claimed to have visited the sheriff's office to report Dylan's disappearance. This crucial detail was quickly debunked when Elaine, desperate for news of her son, contacted the same police station. The response she received was disturbing. There was absolutely no record of Mark having been there. This first lie triggered a more rigorous analysis of Mark's entire account. Another revealing detail emerged when Mark mentioned that Dylan was watching Nickelodeon when he left the house. Elaine immediately contested this information, highlighting that her son, already 13 years old, had not watched this children's channel for at least a year, preferring MTV and other programs aimed at teenagers. For a mother who knew her son's habits, this small slip revealed that something wasn't right in Mark's narrative. The contrast between Elaine and Mark's actions during the first hours of the disappearance could not be more striking. While Elaine and her older son, Corey, immediately traveled the 6 hours to Bayfield upon learning of the disappearance, arriving late at night and initiating desperate searches of the property, even in the darkness, they discovered something disconcerting. Dylan's own father was sleeping at home with the lights off, apparently indifferent to the fate of his missing son. The first official investigations could only confirm part of the story. Security cameras showed that Dylan had indeed been at the airport and at Walmart with his father, but his whereabouts after arriving at Mark's house remained a disturbing mystery. The new explanation offered by Mark, that Dylan might have walked to a friend's house located 9.5 miles away in the freezing winter cold of Colorado, was met with skepticism by investigators. What 13-year-old would make such a journey on foot without telling anyone, especially in such adverse weather conditions? The authorities then initiated a massive search operation, mobilizing sniffer dogs, helicopters, drones, and dozens of volunteers to scour the mountainous region around Mark's house. During these initial searches, One of the sniffer dogs indicated having detected an odor in front of Mark's house, but without samples for comparison, it was not possible to confirm if it was Dylan's trail. Days passed without any sign of the teenager. Thanksgiving came and went, and there were still no concrete clues. It was at this moment that Elaine decided to take the initiative, creating her own independent search team. She organized press conferences, distributed missing person posters, held fundraising events, and even created a Facebook page offering a reward of $50,500 for anyone with information about Dylan's whereabouts. During all this time, Mark remained notably absent from these initiatives. He did not participate in the searches, did not attend the fundraising events, did not help with the posters, and kept himself distant from the press. When questioned about his seemingly disinterested behavior, Mark simply replied that people needed something to talk about and insisted on his innocence, claiming not to know what had happened to his son. The police, increasingly suspicious, obtained a search warrant for Mark's house. During this investigation, they found some drops of blood that were later confirmed to belong to Dylan. Mark tried to explain the presence of blood by saying it was from a year before, when Dylan had accidentally cut his finger while at his house. Investigators also collected a part of the living room carpet that presented a suspicious stain. Mark was taken in for questioning, and investigators made it clear that they did not consider him a suspect, stating that it was just a standard procedure. However, during the questioning, Mark reacted extremely defensively, accusing the police of treating him as a suspect when he should be seen as a victim who lost his son. This disproportionate reaction raised even more suspicions. As part of the investigation, all those involved were subjected to polygraph tests. While Elaine passed easily, Mark completely failed the test, a fact that would be remembered later during his trial. After months of fruitless searches, and with the investigation seeming to cool down, the case took a dramatic turn in June 2013, 7 months after Dylan's disappearance. The authorities organized an intensive 5-day search operation, covering an extension of 10 miles that led to the street where Mark lived. This decision to search the area near Mark's residence again was not by chance. Investigators were increasingly convinced that the answers were close to that house. On June 25th, this persistence finally produced results, although devastating ones. In an area about 8 miles from Mark's house, investigators found the first physical traces of Dylan, fragments of a white t-shirt, confirmed as belonging to the teenager, his headphones, a sock, a shoe, and more disturbingly, a 4-inch hair that tests confirmed to be Dylan's. These initial discoveries, despite being disturbing, still left room for a tenuous hope. However, this hope was completely destroyed just 2 days later. On June 27, 2013, the authorities had to give the most painful news possible to the family. During their searches, they had found a black garbage bag containing human bones. Forensic analyses quickly confirmed that those partial remains belonged to Dylan Redwine. The place where the remains were found presented characteristics that raised even more suspicions about Mark. The bones were in an extremely steep and difficult-to-access region, about 8 miles from Mark's house. It was an area that required knowledge of the terrain and determination to reach, not a place where someone would simply stumble upon by chance, and certainly not a location where a 13-year-old would go alone to fish or explore. On the weekend following the discovery, the community held a candlelight vigil and a balloon release in memory of Dylan. Mark, once again, did not attend any of these events, an absence that was noticed and commented on by everyone. The medical examiners, when analyzing the bones found, faced difficulties in determining the precise cause of death. The remains were too partial to conclusively establish whether Dylan had been the victim of a wild animal attack, as Mark insisted, or if he had suffered human violence. The story would not end there. In a disturbing twist, in the spring of 2014, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Mark called a reporter, informing that he was about to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital because he was going crazy due to stalkers, haters, and reporters. He claimed that Elaine had driven by his house, shouting "murderer" through the window. The reporter was confused about why Mark would contact him instead of a friend or family member. Shortly after, Elaine obtained a restraining order against Mark, fearing for her safety and that of her other children, Corey and Brandon, the latter with children of his own. In August 2015, almost 3 years after the disappearance, Mark was finally officially identified as a person of interest in the case, while Elaine, her boyfriend, and Corey were all ruled out as suspects. Mark was the only one who presented significant inconsistencies in his account and strange behavior after the disappearance. The most crucial discovery of the case would come on November 1st, 2015, when a cyclist traveling a trail on Mountain Valley Road found a human skull. Forensic examinations identified the skull as Dylan's and revealed disturbing details. There was a fracture just above the left eyebrow and clear signs of blunt trauma to the back of the head. These findings definitively contradicted Mark's theory that Dylan had been attacked by a wild animal. The medical examiners confirmed that this type of trauma was not consistent with an animal attack, but clearly indicated human violence. When confronted with this evidence, Mark changed his story again, now claiming that he believed Dylan had been kidnapped and murdered. The interrogators immediately pointed out the inconsistency of this theory with the evidence. Not satisfied, Mark developed yet another theory, suggesting that Dylan could have been accidentally shot by a hunter. He was so convinced of this possibility that he even recorded a video of himself going to the location where Dylan's skull was found, demonstrating how the teenager could have been hit by a hunter, and posted it on Facebook. This bizarre behavior shocked the community and investigators, who noted that Mark seemed to be the only one determined to find alternative explanations for what all the evidence indicated had been a homicide committed by someone close to Dylan. With the discovery of the skull and evidence of blunt trauma, the case was no longer a mystery about what had happened to Dylan. The question now was, why would Mark Redwine kill his own son? The answer would come from a place that no one could have imagined. After years of investigation, forensic evidence, and Mark's suspicious behavior, a crucial question still remained unanswered. Why would a father kill his own son? What would be the motive so powerful that would lead Mark Redwine to commit such a horrendous act against his own flesh and blood? The answer to this question would finally be revealed during the trial, and would leave everyone present in the courtroom, jurors, spectators, and even the most experienced investigators, completely shocked. The decisive moment came when Corey Redwine, Dylan's older brother, took the witness stand to give his testimony. With visible discomfort, but determined to bring justice to his brother, Corey revealed a dark secret that he had kept for years, a secret that explained not only why Dylan was reluctant to visit his father, but also what could have triggered the brutal crime. Corey testified that, approximately 1 year before Dylan's disappearance, he and his brother were on a car trip with their father. The two teenagers were in the back seat of the vehicle, watching videos and movies on Mark's laptop to pass the time during the trip. At one point, while fiddling with the laptop to take some photos, the brothers accidentally accessed the image gallery and came across deeply disturbing photographs of their father. According to Corey's testimony, the images were of an extremely degrading and bizarre nature. They showed Mark wearing bright red lipstick, blush, and eyeshadow, dressed in a red bra and a blue lace blouse. Even more shocking, he was wearing an adult diaper containing human feces. The subsequent photos were even more disturbing. They showed Mark eating and licking feces from the diaper and even hanging the dirty diaper from his mouth. Corey described how he and Dylan were immediately traumatized by the discovery. They quickly closed the laptop and did not mention what they had seen. When they returned home, the two brothers locked themselves in the bathroom and took photos of these images with their cell phones as proof of what they had found, but decided not to tell anyone about the incident, not even their mother. However, according to Corey, the psychological impact of the discovery was profound, especially for Dylan, who was only 12 years old at the time. Throughout the following year, Dylan mentioned the photos to Corey on several occasions, demonstrating that he could not get the disturbing images out of his head. For a developing teenager, trying to process something of this nature about his own father would be extremely confusing and distressing. The prosecution argued that during Dylan's forced visit to Mark in November 2012, it is likely that the teenager finally confronted his father about the photos. Perhaps seeking to understand or make sense of what he had seen, Dylan may have approached the subject with Mark, without realizing the danger this confrontation represented. Mark, furious with the possibility of his sordid secret being exposed, would have entered a state of violent fury that culminated in the murder of his son. Corey also revealed during his testimony that neither he, nor Dylan, nor even Brandon, the older half-brother, called Mark father. They referred to him by his first name. Corey described the relationship with Mark as abusive, stating that the father was physically, verbally, and mentally abusive to his children. This context of an already fragile relationship makes it even more plausible that Mark reacted with violence when confronted by Dylan. The prosecutors emphasized that Mark was desperate to prevent his shameful secret from coming to light. If Dylan told his mother, other family members, or friends about what he had discovered, the public shame would be devastating. In Mark's distorted mind, it seems that permanently silencing his son became preferable to facing the humiliation of exposing his behavior. Mark's defense tried to discredit the photos, claiming that it wasn't him in the images and absurdly suggesting that Elaine had photoshopped his face onto them to embarrass him. This allegation, like his previous theories about Dylan's disappearance, completely lacked credibility and only highlighted his pattern of denial and evasion of responsibility. The revelation of this disturbing motive during the trial not only left the court in a state of shock, it finally closed the circle of the investigation, explaining Mark's strange behavior after the disappearance, his reluctance to participate in the searches, and his constant changing of stories. The secret that he was willing to protect at any cost had finally come to light, revealing the dark depths to which a person can descend to protect their image, even if it means taking the life of their own son. The path to Mark Redwine's trial was exceptionally long and tortuous. Although he was formally arrested in July 2017 in Washington, D.C., where he had moved to escape the protests in front of his house in Colorado, the judicial process faced an impressive series of delays. The trial was rescheduled no less than 10 times for various reasons. Initially, the postponements occurred because Mark's original lawyer was arrested for domestic violence, forcing him to find new legal representation. Later, with the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the judicial system faced significant paralysis. To complicate matters further, Mark's new lawyer contracted COVID-19, resulting in more postponements. Only in 2021, almost 9 years after Dylan's disappearance, did the trial finally begin. During the trial, the prosecution presented a detailed and disturbing narrative of the events. According to the prosecutors, Mark had killed Dylan in the living room of the house, violently hitting him in the back of the head. This blow would have caused Dylan to fall forward, resulting in the fracture above the left eyebrow found on the skull. The prosecution alleged that, after the murder, Mark dismembered his son's body and placed the remains in the back of his truck, subsequently spreading them across remote areas of the forest. This theory was corroborated by substantial physical evidence. Canine search units had detected the odor of human remains in the back of Mark's truck and on his clothes, as well as in the living room. Forensic investigators, using blacklight, found traces of blood throughout the room, on the floor, on the couch, on the coffee table, and under a rug. The blood distribution pattern was consistent with a violent attack followed by an attempt to clean up. Mark's erratic and suspicious behavior over the years weighed significantly against him during the trial. The jurors were informed about his multiple failures in polygraph tests and his refusal to take a test during the Dr. Phil show, an infamous moment when he angrily walked off the stage amid boos from the audience. A chronological compilation of his different theories about Dylan's disappearance was presented, from voluntary escape to wild animal attack, kidnapping by strangers, to the alleged accidental shot by a hunter, each more unlikely than the previous one. The trial also brought to light a disturbing pattern of behavior that extended far beyond Dylan's case. Betsy, Mark's first ex-wife and mother of his oldest son, Brandon, gave an impactful testimony. She reported that, during the turbulent 6 years of her marriage to Mark, he had made a terrifying threat during the divorce process. He said he would kill Brandon so that she could never see her son again. This threat, made decades earlier, gained a new and sinister dimension in light of what happened to Dylan. Betsy also shared a disturbing memory from approximately 30 years before. During a camping trip with Mark, he had casually commented, while observing the remote forest landscape, that area would be a perfect place to get rid of a body. At the time, she had interpreted the comment as a morbid joke, but years later, with the son of this same man found dismembered in a similar forest area, his words acquired a deeply disturbing meaning. Brandon also testified at the trial, reporting a revealing incident during the first days of the search for Dylan. In a meeting to coordinate search efforts, Brandon confronted Mark about his lack of participation, questioning why he remained at home while everyone else was desperately searching for Dylan. Brandon observed that, throughout the entire ordeal, he never saw Mark cry or show anxiety. He seemed merely annoyed with the situation. Even more incriminating, Brandon remembered that Mark had mentioned, long before the discovery of the skull, that he believed Dylan had died due to blunt trauma to the head, a cause of death too specific to be a random guess. Mark's defense team tried to discredit all the evidence presented. They argued that the canine evidence was second-rate science, that the compromising photos had no relation to the case and were presented only to harm Mark's image, and that no one suspected him until Elaine began spreading rumors. They also insisted that the trauma to the skull could have been caused by bear or mountain lion teeth, ignoring the fact that the bones were clean and did not present bite marks typical of animal attacks. In a final desperate move, they claimed that the police had been biased and negligent from the beginning of the investigation. After hearing all the testimonies and examining the evidence, the jury retired for deliberation. It took only 6 hours, a relatively short period for such a complex case, for them to reach a unanimous verdict. Mark Redwine was guilty of second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. On August 15, 2017, Mark had pleaded not guilty to all charges, maintaining his stance of denial until the end. Elaine, who knew her ex-husband well, was not surprised by this statement, noting that it was consistent with his pattern of never taking responsibility for any mistakes, regardless of the evidence. Finally, in 2021, Mark Redwine, then 59 years old, was sentenced to 48 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Although many questioned why he did not receive life imprisonment for such a heinous crime, the reality is that, with almost 60 years of age and facing almost 5 decades of incarceration, Mark will likely spend the rest of his days behind bars. During the reading of the sentence, Mark remained seated, emotionally impassive, with a blank stare, the same expression he had maintained throughout the disappearance and death of his son. Surprisingly, even after his conviction, there are people who continue to believe in his innocence, arguing that he was unjustly accused. However, for those who followed the case closely, examined the evidence, and observed Mark's behavior over the years, justice finally prevailed, bringing a partial closure to a tragedy that should never have happened. If you were impacted by this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true crime cases and unsolved mysteries. Leave your comment below sharing what you found most impacting in this case. Your support is fundamental for us to continue bringing stories like this. Thank you for watching, and until the next video.